The following entries are not chronologically arranged. The longer you listen, the further into the past you shall go, and accordingly, you shall hear some things from my past which, when I revisit them in the here and now, make me pause in a whole mix of emotions. I only choose to firmly make them more concrete now, against the risk of me revising my own history. But the voice that you hear right now belongs to someone who wrote the words being spoken to you a while ago too. The way this voice's owner feels towards the words that it is reading aloud have changed over time as well. How it reads these words one day will be different 2 years later. That, I think, might also be worth considering. In that sense of the word, then, is this piece of writing a diary for myself. Some of you, no doubt, have had similar experiences, and so I shall say no more. It is your choice. Sometimes it seems that many of us pretend to forget that we are always, at almost every turn, if not every turn, choosing the lesser evils, so to speak. What this evil or these evils are, I cannot answer for you, although I'm going to name a few of them for myself later. But I do get the feeling that were you to find out for yourself, in a meaningful way, what these evils were to be for yourself, and what exactly they mean for you, then you would find yourself in that condition of choosing the lesser of evils, or, said in another way, in that condition of having already chosen the lesser of evils. It is just so, a reminder to you and to myself. These forgotten thoughts came back to me very strongly. I'm going to break from my own comfort zone for a little bit. Maybe you can call it cheating, and refer directly to a few things by name. It was getting hard not to. It seems that many of us have been, for a little while now, a bit more aware of at least 2 trash compactor walls coming in to squeeze us from either side. One wall includes a mess of so-called short-form content, Vine or TikTok-esque, so to speak, which is easy enough for the individual to identify and condemn. There is now plenty of talk about how our attention spans are shrinking, or maybe as others would prefer, being shrunk by short-form content, and how we use this content to prevent ourselves from proactively thinking about other things in earnest. The other wall coming towards us is characterized by long-form content, things like video essays, podcasts, edutainment videos, movies, films, books, and the like. Some would even say that a whole lot of what many call long-form content is really just a series of short-form content strung up together into a neat little package. Whatever the case, it makes no difference in the end. Individuals who first forsake short-form content seem to often try and find refuge in long-form content. Some say long-form content generally tends to require more real brain power, real effort to absorb and digest the information being presented. To be sure, these individuals do have their own opinions on what constitutes good or bad long-form content. They're certainly not champions of the format to a fault, but in total, it could be said that, to many people, good long-form content is preferable to any short-form content. There are now, however, also plenty of those who recognize that the 2 walls are really more like 2 sides of the same coin. You can watch hours and hours of hour-long videos with thesis statements, arguments, evidence, conclusions, and whatever else. Hours of documentaries talking about the life and times and thoughts and ideas of thinkers from millennia ago. You can even sink months and years of your life reading and rereading the complete works of a singular writer. You can learn so much. And for what? What is all this information to you? What are you doing with it? And I'm not asking this question with productivity in mind. The very first time that I wrote something personal with the intention of throwing it out into the world, I was sure to fill it with all sorts of disclaimers and explanations of what I did and did not mean by this or that or whatever else. My thoughts and feelings were, as far as I could tell, on full display, and like many other people in this world, at the end of the day, all I wanted was to avoid misunderstanding as much as possible. Looking back at that now, it seems so full of clarity compared to what I am currently struggling to put out. I think that I think of it this way. Much like in the course of a discussion that you may have witnessed before, in which someone says something like, "It's not just that, but also," I now no longer have the desire to gradually lead others down through a series of ideas to some conclusion. Or, said in another way, I no longer want to go through a series of symptoms that lead to some cause. I now have an overriding desire to leap from a surface-level symptom, which almost everyone can perceive, to some removed cause, which I have the confidence or arrogance to believe is the cause which should be considered, and which I have the confidence or arrogance to present as a cause and not merely as a symptom of some other deep-seated cause. That I have this urge alarms me in some way, and yet it also exists alongside that part of me which would still like to substantiate something to the best of my ability. It all leads to a frustratingly contradictory state of mind, wherein part of me wants to hurry up and get to the point, whereas the other part notices all the gaps in substantiation, precisely when I am speaking on symptoms and causes. But that is one thing. This preface has served its purpose, and so we can move on. It is, it seems to me, an openly denied reality, really, that what one individual considers a cause of some issue or phenomenon or whatever else, another individual sees as merely a symptom. Perhaps you can recall a time when this devolved into a ring around a rosy of the same words being thrown out over and over again, as if people were all clamoring to upstage one another to find out just who exactly can utter the deepest, most fundamental cause of whatever it is they're talking about. One person's cause is another's symptom. That person's real cause is merely another person's symptom, and that person's cause is merely another person's symptom, and so on and so forth. It would be too obvious now to ask, but how do they know? We've had the answer to that question since probably before recorded history. The probable reality is that you and I and most people we know in our lives are guilty of having engaged in such behavior many, many times, whether we opened our mouths to say it aloud or not. Whatever else, the thought was floating around there in our heads. It seems to me that this is one of those few times where it is of lesser importance whether or not the thoughts we hold are correct, right, substantiated, or whatever else. It is that confidence, that arrogance, to be able to confront the opinions of others in such a thoughtless way. Principally, there's something off about it, but pragmatically, whatever that means, maybe it's one of our most useful tools towards making people feel bad, which might lead to something meaningful. At one moment, someone demands something short and sweet. At the next, they're pouring their heart out for hours to another in hopes of communicating their feelings. It seems to me that it's not that people prefer ideas to be short and precise for the sake of clarity. They're just looking for ideas that they can agree with or shoot down within moments of radar detection. Digestion is the word, and people don't like being constipated. I'm a fan of poetry and implication as well, but I'm also someone who can admit their observation that quality and quantity are not an either-or. Of course, it need no mention that the world is also filled with words and words and words and words that seem to talk about something, only for all those words to ultimately end up as a nothing. Not without consideration, to be sure, but as a nothing. And of course, it also need no mention that the world is also filled with inauthentic authenticity and inauthentic inauthenticity. I used to argue to myself that the act of consumption naturally implies an internal act of creation. I now argue to myself further that this internal act of creation is merely yet another act of consumption. This is not a full circle movement in one sense of the phrase, because we don't quite end up exactly where we started. But in another sense of the phrase, perhaps qualitatively, it is. Of course, when someone full of passion for the suffering of others puts out a work in this spirit, half the world seems to accuse that someone of aping Jesus Christ without any shame, while the other half receives that passion in varying degrees of good faith, ignorance, and self-illusion. And once those who have accused others of aping Jesus Christ then one day seek to also put out a work in the spirit of passion for the suffering of others, again half the world says one thing, the other half another. Rinse and repeat, as they say, but I do not think that any of it was meaningless for any party. Perhaps you have heard once before that it is not at all the same to be lonely as it is to be alone. Some of you, I trust, can feel or have already felt the difference between these two words, although perhaps some of you have also conflated being alone with being lonely to your own detriment. Perhaps you have also heard, once or twice, or many times before, and from many different voices from throughout time, calls for the individual to be more comfortable with oneself being alone. Sometimes, as these many voices have said, it involves being alone with one's own thoughts, not having too many other people around to directly distract from yourself, although you might be thinking a lot about other people while being alone, and being alone itself, of course, does not mean having a physical distance, physical isolation, or anything else like that from other people. And it bears mentioning in passing, I think, that we are not considering those who are alone, know that they are alone, but believe themselves to be not lonely, when in fact they are. And perhaps, finally, you have also heard, in comparable measure, voices suggesting not that the individual be more comfortable with oneself being lonely, nor more accepting of being lonely, nor more prepared to be lonely even. Rather, perhaps, you have heard voices suggest that to be lonely usually brings about a change of state, a qualitative leap within the individual that sometimes can lead to something meaningful. When I have spoken before about large groups of people, I most often do so with the individual at the forefront of my concern. I do not think that I have the tendency nor the preference to speak about the individual as a mere unit, subsumed within the masses, although I can appreciate the efforts of others who do so. I say this remark to preface the next. Many of us now are more aware of the deluge of information all around us, to the point where we have also started second-guessing the familiarity and ease at which we allow ourselves to drown in it. Some of these individuals are now openly calling for others to distance themselves from this deluge of information, all for the sake of our own well-being. What I mean, plainly, is that people will sometimes recoil in disgust at themselves for having realized that they wasted a great deal of time looking at a great deal of information that other people put out. After everything, they realized that it was all for naught, that the few laughs, tears, and frowns that flitted across their face were essentially meaningless, save for that one saving grace that they were confirmatory symptoms of the anxiety and despair within themselves. But that is not all. People are now more aware that they can seldom last a moment alone with themselves without the external other's voice providing a comfortable noise with which to drown out the so-called self. We've already spoken before about how many of us are aware of this, and how many of us will hand-wave it off with a self-deprecative joke, and how this leads to a further entrenching within conflict, suffering, and emptiness, so I will speak no more of it here. For just a moment, these individuals realized that information that is not integrated does not become knowledge, and past that, there is also a slim chance that they might have gotten a sense that knowledge that is not integrated does not become understanding. But again, that is a topic for today from yesterday. In the here and now, however, we must contend with the reality that people who have these occasional moments of self-disgust at what they are will only then go on to continue the behaviors that led to these moments. They will continue to drown themselves in information as a means of escaping the responsibility of having to meaningfully integrate that information into themselves in order to transform it into knowledge, and the further responsibility of having to meaningfully integrate that knowledge into themselves in order to transform it into some sort of understanding. However partial, incomplete, insufficient, or otherwise that particular understanding might be, it would still all be preferable to that meaningless and further entrenched conflict, suffering, and emptiness that arises from not integrating knowledge into understanding. All of this said about information and knowledge, however, the distinction between the two becomes increasingly irrelevant when one takes a step back. In the way that they provide superficial experiences of pleasure, information and knowledge are some of the most accessible, self-producible, and destructive opioids of our time. These observations are not new, nor original, and neither is the situation that we find ourselves in now, although I also heed warning to those who derive solace in this. The catalyst to my writing my feelings over these ideas is that I just get the feeling that the position of the meaningless or misguided pursuit of knowledge as a barrier toward understanding has been superseded by the meaningless pursuit of information, and also that those who now express their concerns over these same ideas are sabotaging themselves and others by fearing an earnest version of the world. within that superseded pursuit of knowledge towards the grasping at of meaning, individuals could have, at the very least, assigned unsubstantiated moral values to the pursuit itself, or to the accumulation of knowledge, or, wherever relevant, to the demonstration or practice of the skills that emerged from that knowledge. They could have then had their unsubstantiated moral beliefs shattered in a moment of great meaningful conflict, suffering, or emptiness. Our current paradigm, our addiction to information, has no such silver lining. Individuals rarely assign a moral value to information beyond those which are attached to fleeting emotions experienced while consuming it. That recoil of disgust, experienced in the act of merely consuming information, most often leads to nothing more than the alcoholic abstaining for a week or two, or perhaps trading the bottle for the cigarette. There is no change. And, of course, merely saying that information is a drug won't help anyone in any meaningful capacity any more than telling the smoker to stop will. They already know what they're doing. They're already ashamed of themselves. They're already aware that they're in the wrong, if I may say that, but again, these are ideas of a topic from a while ago. That is why the bulk of the efforts from those who are now openly calling for others to distance themselves from this deluge of information will be for naught. It is in the name of moving forward, which is precisely why there is a great chance of further entrenchment. Bad faith. As with a lot of things, there is no panacea from outside of the individual. To return to the subject of lesser evils, then, well, I don't think that the me, right now, can say much more on it. The mindless pursuit of knowledge, the utter faith many of us place within it. It is often a necessary step on the path to understanding. It only remains an evil if the individual chooses to remain within it, which we most often do. Information, placed beside knowledge, is that greater evil, which is easily perceived by the individual to be just so. We may then shun information for knowledge, but doing so is simply choosing the lesser of two evils. It does not change the condition that information and knowledge remain as two extremely challenging obstacles for the individual to surmount on the path to understanding. I find it difficult to resist the urge to be distracted away from being alone by myself. That is an indication to me that I am still deeply within the addiction. But then again, to call it an addiction would be to excuse the responsibility I have to choose to abstain from whatever it is that is affecting me in this terrible way. And so perhaps I've got to do a little bit more thinking about it, but only a little bit more. Maybe it is now as it has been for thousands of years, that thinking and overthinking have become fetishized, ways to delude the self into believing either that progress is being made in some abstract and undefined way, or that there is an air of suffering, self-torture, loneliness, lostness, forgiveness that is truer and more authentic to one's own self against a world that is otherwise. Maybe it is that the highest is not to understand it, it is to act on it.